We'll call this Searching for America, the place that used to be, that is no more, and you have to be old enough to remember what the difference is. Unfortunately, that is way too true. So let's find out what went wrong, or at least let's try to find some dialogue to understand what did go wrong. And we begin, oddly enough, with a nuclear bomb going off in Japan. I really think it started very much right there, and that meant that the university was more important at that moment in time than it had ever been in the history of the world. There have always been people who said, I know, I know, I know, and were of course mostly proven wrong, just like the university was proven wrong back then. They know, but the reality is it always turns out differently than they expect. As is, the constant truth that, today we are looking at weapons of mass destruction spread throughout the world. They really are. I'm sure they're in the hands of some terrorists. America is one of the biggest terrorists there is today. People who attack other nations are the terrorists of that nation. And of course, we did in fact attack Iraq without any real provocation. Fear drove the Bush administration, the last Bush administration, to say, we have to do it, we have to do it, we have to do it. And of course they didn't. And of course now we have Trump, who says, we're threatened, we're threatened, we're threatened. But the fact of the matter is that North Korea would in fact be demolished completely if anything remotely resembling a nuclear threat coming across the seas hit America. And of course, then there are always the consequences of all that. Well, real reality of it is that back when nuclear weapons were first built and exploded, they all said, well, now the world will be a safer place because nobody would think of having a war with these things. Well, that's just not how men are. History proves that. That's not how it is. So we live in a world that was designed by university experimentation with energy. They wanted a bomb, and of course, if Germany had built the bomb first, things would have been different. But America built it first, and then the Americans, the military, when the American public was just too tired of war to complain, the military was blowing up Pacific Islands just because they could, to make the rest of the world fear. So then the rest of the world began to hate us. And of course we are the nation that has been at war for practically 100 years straight with very little downtime in between. That's us. Propaganda, assumes that, Russia, or the USSR is the bigger threat. Well, the fact of the matter is we are the bigger threat. And have been for a long time. And that's because power in the hands of leaders, particularly military power in the hands of leaders, is always a bad thing. So, when we have, when the islands were being blown up, and it was clear that America was threatening the world, or the American military was threatening the world, or more correctly, a very few people in high places in government in America were threatening the world to say, fear us, because we can blow up islands. Then, of course, the USSR got those weapons, and of course there were people over here, you could call them spies, but the fact of the matter is they just evened the score and kept Americans from completely ruling the world just like Hitler would have done. Power is power is power, and power is never good. This was a democracy that was built for the purpose of nobody gets to have too much power. Well, that's a situation that never lasts long if there are those who can, in fact, find power for themselves. Power is a terrible thing. And it's rare when somebody does not destroy, if they have any power whatsoever. Just the people who have control over building permits and things, they have power, and they corrupt that too. Yeah, everything that has power has corruption. So democracy, or the more correctly terms of freedom for us all, and equality and all the rest, is dependent upon not so much power. The minimum power possible, that is democracy. So we of course have almost no power to affect government today, and that is our problem. But let's return to the past for a minute. So when USSR got nuclear weapons, and of course they were killing the environment just as much as the Americans were killing the environment, just building those things and, you know, ruining governments and ruining economies and ruining everything for the sake of that power, because leaders want power. They don't need no wisdom or understanding or knowledge or anything. If they have power, they can just say, kill them. And they do. Nonetheless, so now we have two who call themselves superpowers. And of course, they threaten each other. The primary cause for the Cuban Missile Crisis was that Kennedy was pushing nuclear missiles next to the border of the USSR. And they retaliated by putting nuclear missiles on the border of the U.S. in Cuba. So nearly the end of our world right there, because there are too many nuclear weapons, as if any were really important. But nonetheless, there are enough nuclear weapons to kill the world. Whether you believe that or not doesn't matter, because what is true is true is true. And if they start going off, you'll know. And of course, that's only just the beginning of the threats and the problems that we have. It's that people have weapons of mass destruction. That means once they release the biological weapons, our lives across this planet are forever changed. They have been altering deadly organisms that cause plagues across mankind to make them weaponized, to make them much more effective. And so now, in most cases, instead of, 1 out of 100 certainly should survive, it's maybe 1 out of 10,000 might survive with these biological changes that they made to the DNA programs inside those cells. So there we are, confronted again by an endless parade of weapons of mass destruction, as are geneticists who are changing and mutilating DNA in plants and animals and creatures of all kinds, trying to put DNA from one species into another species and create something entirely new because they want to play God. I tell you, wow, it'll be great. Well, it will not be great. Let me tell you that once the mechanism fails entirely, then we'll learn how to manipulate it and how to make things better. Well, once DNA, or the process of nature to build a living body of life, fails, what we will learn is that we are all dead. That's not a guess, and it's not a game. It's just like weapons of mass destruction. Once you pass the point of no return, which is a few of them go off, the world is dead. That's not hard to understand. That's just the facts of life. That's the facts of the weapons that are out there and facing us. So we went to Vietnam because that was a preparation for World War III. Whether you like Kennedy or not, he was in the process of trying to figure out how to win World War III. That's why we went to Vietnam. And then he was killed. I suspect that was a good thing for the world. Johnson came, was too busy with civil rights to be confronted with the war in Vietnam, and that just escalated to the point where nobody really cared how many Americans were dying over there, because there was things to do over here. Well, the people who were dying, of course, did care, and the war would have ended a lot sooner, and America would have probably so-called won that war if it had not been for the missiles that are blowing aircraft out of the sky, because those were a new wrinkle in the weapons of war. For that matter, all electronics were. And so Vietnam became our testing ground. That's what the military does. Or more correctly, that's what the military will do if allowed to do it, because, if they have a training ground, if they have a situation where they can, play games with what they've got, they will. They say, well, we have to play with it, or we can't, know what the extremes are, what we can or cannot do, which is, of course, true. But if you are the people who are being blown up and your entire lives are being ruined because somebody wants to play games with war materials, well, is that really extra special? Perfect? Is that really equal? Is that really freedom? Is that really anything but hate to you? No, it's not. So America spent all their money in Vietnam, some, but mostly with the universities to build weapons of mass destruction. And then they built the intercontinental ballistic missiles to carry weapons across the seas. And Americans said, no, 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 you can't do that at the very beginning of that. Even though it didn't do them any good, they still were voicing concerns at the whole idea of intercontinental ballistic missiles to carry nuclear weapons. So Kennedy fixed that. He said, let's go to the moon. What a great thing that will be. So they did, because they used it to hide the development of intercontinental ballistic missiles. And of course they spent trillions of dollars doing that, or the equivalent of trillions of dollars today, and that in and of itself bankrupted the United States of America. That day came with some complications. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And the end result of it is that Carter tried to work with it. He should have devalued the dollar, but he tried to work with it, and everybody said, well, if the inflation is going to be this way, you got to buy something, because then you'll have a lot more money. The price will just keep going up. So that made the demand for money much greater. Even though the whole idea was to pay off the debt simply increased, because people were not willing to pay off the debt. They want to be rich. They all want to be rich. Oh well. It doesn't work well, though. Not for a nation. Reagan came, and his only contribution to you, the USSR bankrupted themselves, and that's how it is that they came to an end. Reagan had nothing to do with it. The Gorbachev, I think it was, that said the USSR should go down the road that America is going down. But of course then they learned that at the universities all of the graduates knew nothing but fantasy, and so that failed for them. And now they build back up in similar ways to what they used to have. But that's just how life is. You depend on things that are just fantasies, and what you get are fantasies, or the results of fantasies. Anyway, Reagan sold all your gold. Do you not remember that he said, why shouldn't Americans own gold? And so they did. Where do you suppose the gold came from? Where? You can't sell what you don't have. And well, Fort Knox was full of gold, or so it seems. And well, I'm sure that it actually was. The wealth of a nation, he sold it. And of course, media never told you a thing about it. But that's how he became, fixed the economy, everything is great. And of course, when he got money to spend, he spent it on military weapons. Building up the military. Well, every time you build up a military anywhere in the world, the whole purpose of a military is to, fight, to create a war. That's the purpose of a military. It has no other purpose. It's there to commit murder in the form of war and all the consequences of that war. And of course, as we see in Syria and Iraq today, a gun is not your answer. Take a look. A gun is not your answer. All the weapons of destruction, all the bombs and everything else, all the fires that are resulting from that because people are angry and they're trying to burn you out. All of that is a result of the things that have been done, the fantasies and the failures and the fools that are in charge of life in America, in particular for the last decades. Anyway, so instead of paying off the debt, of course, Reagan did not do any of that. He is famous for saying debts don't matter, or his version of stuff, debts don't matter, because if you have all your numbers in a bank account, they don't matter. They don't matter. You can have $1 trillion in your bank account. Go ahead, write yourself $1 trillion in your account book. Doesn't matter. You can feel great about yourself. You can say, I'm a trillionaire. But the fact of the matter is, if you try to spend the money, then it matters. So you can have as much as you want in your account until the day you start spending it. Then it matters. Because reality gets involved. Reality is a very, very, very different thing than numbers are. Numbers can be anything you want them to be, as is clearly proven by American currency. American currency is, of course, completely false. It has been counterfeited and counterfeited and counterfeited. And counterfeiting means that the government officials, to hide all their failures, hid the counterfeiting in asset creation, instead of saying that we have inflation and we produce this much more, many more dollars to inflate the currency. They just say we have more assets. And like a bank, they say, well, if you have assets compared to your debt, well, then you're good. So, and 3 or 4 years ago, back when the accounting was still online, you could look at, we had $204 trillion of assets as Americans. Divided that by 7.5 billion people, I think it was, and you got $28,000 or $30,000 per individual face, human face on the planet. Babies, prisoners, human face, $28,000 in American currency. And of course, you can't cash that in because it ain't real. You can't get that much stuff back. You can't. And at that time there was $153 trillion in debt. That's not the federal debt, which is just what Congress spends and doesn't pay for. This is the American debt, which is, business and personal and college and all of it. American debt at that time was $153 trillion. In a nation of about 100 million workers. All right. So we take, basically it's 100 million workers. It's easy figuring. $1 trillion is equal to $10,000 per each and every one of 100 million people. Makes it very easy to figure. So $153 trillion is the same as $1.53 million of debt per worker. Only workers pay. If you don't do something as work, you don't get paid. Unless, of course, you're a university professor or something who gets paid just for having a diploma. During the Reagan years, they were constantly giving themselves $1 million raises. And that made having a university education valuable. And that made everybody in America say, this is where the money is. So they went off to university and they sent their children off to university and they paid enormous amounts of money to get them a university education, which became money because, after all, when you can print or so-called counterfeit all the currency in America for whatever reason you want, well, then you can have money. That, of course, didn't last too terribly long, because when you saturate the market, well, then the market has no use for you anymore. So after enough college graduates got out in the first few years, then there was a problem. You know, I don't want to share. So they printed more money, and they started bragging. How do you stay in power? How do you get power? Well, the first way you do it is to get money. So once you're in charge of the money, then you have power over people. And to keep that power, you have to build yourself an army. Otherwise, humanity will not let you keep it. You have to have an army. So who is the army of the university diplomas? Well, they are the people who get a university diploma, or who benefit from a university diploma. So the people who get a university diploma are, of course, teachers and educators and universities. So universities and education got all the money. Lots and lots of the money. State of Illinois is bankrupt because the educational system took all the money. And of course, once your army starts to get power for themselves, then they ransack and rape every school district out there to get more money for themselves. And they ransack and rape a state to make slaves for themselves and say, yeah, we're going to quit working in 20 years no matter what, so you have to pay us, all that we had, plus benefits and pensions and everything else. We don't care about you, we want this for ourselves. And so they take anything and everything they want and hand us the bill. But of course we can't pay that one either. Can't pay the federal debt, can't pay state of Illinois debt, can't pay anything, because all the money is gone. We are in fact bankrupt as a state and as a nation, which means we can't afford to pay our bills. All of the bills all the money we make is used to pay the interest on the debt they created for us. So now we have threats from nuclear weapons, all of that. We have genocide looking at, because people are in fact mutilating nature itself. Geneticists are doing that, or the university is doing that for a broad term. And they in fact are trying to make nature itself fail, because they figured that's how they learn. That's how they learn with building bridges and stuff. They weight it down or push it around until it collapses, and then say, okay, that's the point of no return. That's the point where we can't go farther than this. Well, they're trying to do that with nature, with the very instructions that build your body of life, the billions of instructions that build your body of life. And of course, they're altering the chemicals in there and everything else. And you just go back a little bit on to where did all this come from. You get to the point of Einstein starts the process, in fact, with his E equals mc squared, or energy is equal to mass times the speed of light squared. Well, take that formula apart, and it says that energy is equal to mass, or something, going the speed of light times the speed of light. Or it is the formula for kinetic energy, which is E equals mc, speed times mass. And the fact of the matter is just the formula for kinetic energy with speed as a constant. That's what E equals mc squared is. It's the formula for kinetic energy with speed as a constant. It is not energy. It's simply a multiplied force. But nonetheless, that did help them create an atomic bomb, and now we live with it. And the damages that it can do, and the problems that it has created. So, we're threaded there. And then, of course, we actually go back to the monkey trial, or the place where the evolution got its beginning. Because with evolution, now we don't have to be responsible. Now we can play with the life. Now we don't have to respect any life. It's all an accident. Now, things are whatever we want them to be. We can be God. And that is, of course, what the university tries to do with all of its genetic experimentation. You might think your experiments and your money and your all the things that they're doing with genetics is to make your life better by changing health care. That is not what they are doing at all. They are crucifying life over there. And if it was just one life to learn, that might be one thing. But it should never be done. Never. But even if it was, that's not what they do. They repeat every experiment 1,000,000 times or more. Crucify this life, crucify 1,000,000,000 more. Is basically the whole deal. And they do that because of evolution. And evolution, of course, is an outright lie. It says chaos builds life. Chaos can't build life. Chaos is the destruction of everything complex. They say, life is just a series of accidents that turned out better and better and better. Well, that just has no foundation whatsoever in reality. Nothing. No foundation whatsoever. There are so many things there. You can't have a heart without blood. Can't have blood without bones. Can't have bones that work for you unless you have joints. You can't have joints without, balls and sockets and, tendons to hold it together, and muscles and the control of muscles. And that takes a brain, and on and on and on and on. There's 1,000,000,000 things that do not add up with evolution. Not even a tiny little bit. So, nonetheless, they took that away. So the university threatens us with weapons of mass destruction, and they threaten us with genetics, and they took away your right to complain with evolution. Nope, you can't complain because, and we teach it all through the schools that life is just an accident, and so therefore we can do whatever we want to with it because it's just an accident. And I ask them when it all falls apart, and they say, not to worry. In 1,000,000,000 years or so, evolution will just come up in something else. Well, no, it won't. It doesn't exist. Except for the fantasies that people use. So, anyway, then we have all the things that is being done today. And all of the things are being caused by power. The power to make things happen in humanity is the control of money. So we have people that are through the Obama years, they were counterfeiting $20 trillion a year, and I don't know if that includes the debt they were creating or not, but they were adding $20 trillion per year, every year, in asset increases. That includes the year 2008. So $20 trillion a year for 100 million workers is $90,000 per year, every year. Or maybe it was 91,000, I'm not sure. Anyway, if you are not making $90,000 more in one year than you were the next, then you're going behind. And in other words, they were destroying the money that they were giving you while you were being paid. Since the money is counterfeit, you were never actually paid. It was all slaves. You were never paid, even though you could go collect, a car or whatever you wanted with the money. The reality of what you have in the bank, or what you think you have in the bank, is worthless in terms of reality. But that's not the point of this. The point of that is that those who control the currency, and they are, not just simply the Federal Reserve, that isn't just it. They are more than that. They're behind the scenes. They're where the power lives, and the puppets go bigger, 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 or whatever it is you want to call it. Those people who are in charge of lots and lots of money make decisions that affect the rest of us. But those people who are in government and who are spending, for in the Obama years, $20 trillion per year, that is not accounted for other than to say it's an asset. or maybe it's part of the $153 million per worker debt at that time, those people, those tiny few people, spend $20 trillion a year in your name, adding to the currency. Did you see it go by? Did they spend it on you? Did they spend it on the nation? No, no, they bought themselves some pride, throwing it away at different nations, threw it away at war, but mostly they gave it to themselves at the university. Experimental this and experimental that, and experimental the other thing, hiding it because they don't have to account for it, except for an asset, hiding it. But one of the worst things they've ever done, in fact the worst thing humanity has ever done, the very worst, is to try to ignite fusion here on Earth. That's what they call it. They say fusion is the combining of two hydrogen atoms into a helium atom. That's their definition of fusion. And if every BTU of heat coming from the sun was formed in that manner, then the entire universe would be full of helium, because they say every BTU is making a helium atom. That's what they say. Well, helium is one of the rarest elements there is. And they say that there's, well, it doesn't matter. The reality is I've confronted and proven every single theory they have about the sun is wrong. And when asked, what are you going to do when nuclear fire, which is what they're trying to ignite here, atoms on fire, what are you going to do in a nuclear fire when you ignite it? How are you going to put it out? Because everything is made of atoms. And they say not to worry, because there's not enough gravity here on Earth, so it'll just put itself out. And they depend on that. Their theory of that depends on the idea that there's an element that no one knows of, cannot prove in any form other than fantasy, that's 15 times heavier than lead. Without their element that's 15 times heavier than lead, their entire hypothesis about what is or is not a fire on the sun falls apart. So they are risking our entire world on their experiment, and they have several, and one of the biggest experiments is coming up soon. When they ignite an atom on fire, and it burns, and it doesn't go out on its own, then our world dies. They're trying to ignite the same fire on the sun here on Earth. That's what they're trying to do. ITAR is the newest one that will soon be ready. Big outfit, supported by many governments. All the universities say what a great idea. Trillions of dollars. So they're not going to give it up unless they're forced. But the fact is, you can ignite the same fire that is on the sun. It obviously burns up there. It's there. It burns. We know it exists. You can ignite it, but it's a 10 million degree fire, and we can't put it out. We can't even approach it. And the fact is that, once the fire is burning, it will eject the entire atmosphere of the planet, consume the entire Earth, blow up the planet, and, alter the solar system itself. There is no greater abomination than that. Not even trying to completely destroy nature itself by changing genetics, mutilating it, altering it, and throwing our lives under the bus, so to speak. And just this is how it is. So some people understand at least some of these things, and it gets them upset, and it gets them angry. And then we have all the people who had to, we have the universities who had to cover up their lies and their cheating and their stealing and their thieving and their traitorous conduct and their terrorism, because the rest of the world refused to take some of their money, our money, because it was counterfeit and they knew it. They wanted something more, and they wanted our business. So, to keep them quiet, to keep the resources flowing so that the garbage dumps could continually be full, they sold our businesses to them so they could hide the reality of what they do. It is that simple. When you know the money isn't real, you want something that is. And so what do you give them? What do they want? And the answer is they wanted our business. And now they want our property. And of course, the fools and the liars and the failures and the thieves of government are giving them our property. Not only are they actually giving it to them, they give them the counterfeit money to come here and take our property. That is what your government, under the influence of a university knows everything, does. That's who you worship as gods. Oh, how smart they are. Well, they were smart enough to destroy the nation of America, but they aren't smart enough to survive it. And if we don't take our nation back, by law, you can't take it back with a gun. Take a look at Syria and Iraq. That's all you're going to get, even worse. Your property burns. It will be even worse. You have guns everywhere. It will be even worse. The whole biblical, rivers of blood will show up if you use a gun. We have to use the law. And the law is First Amendment redress of grievances under the Constitution of the United States of America. It is the law. And redress means that we have the right to take our leaders to court and judge them for whether or not they did in fact keep their oath of office. What they swore to do to get their job. We need to take them to court, and we need to examine them for reality, truth, and consequences, which particularly requires the truth that we must identify the cost of being wrong with genetic mutilation, with overpopulation, with trying to ignite sunfire on Earth, and absolutely everything else the university tries to do. They play games with our lives. They are ransacking our world, and they're ransacking our future. They are sacrificing everything we need to survive. And in real terms, they have become the Satan of our world, destroying the future itself. So say I. You can organize yourself. What you need to understand is that all the miscellaneous hate groups today, all the people who think they're so damn righteous they just can't be wrong, are in fact wrong. They are, every one of them, just like it always is. When you cannot fight the big giant in front of you and you're too angry to let it go, you turn on the little guy that you can defeat. That is the art of bullying, as it has always been. When you can't fight the big one, you make the little one pay for it. So the reality of it is, doesn't matter what group you're in today, basically, the reality of it is that we're all angry with the very same thing. People have stolen our nation. They literally have. Tyrants are using us for toys. They really are. And traitors have betrayed us. And I say that because those are the realities of our day. And you can go to www.justtalking7.info for information site, and get at least the beginning. You can offer your bit of news, and we can create a conversation in that way, so long as I can keep the site open. And of course, those in power don't want anything that suggests they might lose power. That too is how it is. So you have to protect it if you want it. You have to keep it going, you have to support it, and you can organize yourselves in that way so we can fight back for our lives and our future. We need to use redress of grievances. It's the law. We can enforce it, but we have to enforce it as we the people, because the court will not recognize the Constitution. They are corrupt. I have several trials to prove that. That's just the facts. Media, as it is, doesn't want to recognize any threat of any kind for this world or your future or your child. They utterly refuse, because the only thing they can do is brag about how smart the university is. That's their purpose, to display the university as God. God means we can do any damn thing we want, and you can't stop us. Well, we're 8 billion people on this planet. There's a few thousand people in big jobs that can control us, and 8,000 people can tell a few thousand people exactly what they are or are not going to do, because we have the numbers. And we are the work. We are the money, because work is money. And we have a mind that lets us know that if we follow truth, and we have to pay the price of it, but if we follow truth and make a decision that isn't based in just what I want, but based in the reality of what we need, we can overcome and rebuild our planet and our future, and save ourselves. We have to save ourselves. And if you don't think so, even yet, just bear in mind that the truth of the overpopulation is we are growing at over 100 million new mouths to feed every single year. 1 billion more in a decade or less. 1 billion more mouths to feed in a decade or less. And we eat life. And we're consuming their habitat, which means they won't exist. And that means all we have left is cannibalism. You get the drift? Or don't you have a brain?